All right, now just to wrap up a few things pertaining to LINQ and some shortcuts and quality of life improvements that we can use. First, I want to just motivate with a really simple exercise. Let's say we want our LINQ query to return the title and serial number of every book that the library has a copy of. So this is even easier than the example we've been looking at, which is using a left join to give all titles. This is only going to give the titles that we actually have a copy of. So take a minute and do that exercise, pause the video, and do it on your own time. It is actually important to practice this stuff. Once you see the answer, you'll think, yeah, that's obvious, but you may have left out some little important details that you'll forget to do on a quiz or an exam. So you should actually practice it. Okay, so here is a query that will accomplish this. Let's just look at it in Visual Studio. Here's the query that was doing a left join, giving us all titles and null for ones that don't have a serial. Let me just comment that out. And I have down here the even simpler query from that exercise. So all we do is titles join inventory on ISBN t.isbn equals i.isbn. So these are the little things that you might forget, and this is why you should just practice this stuff. You have to use the on keyword. You have to use the equals keyword when doing a join. And then all we do is select the title and the serial. Okay, that will give us the right answer. And I am actually going to look at the JSON returned in the format of the JSON returned because we're going to look at a different way to do it. Okay, here's the result we got back. And the JSON is smaller than what we had before because we're not doing a left join now. So we just get the ones that actually have serial numbers, and we don't have any of these nulls in here. Okay, that was just a simple little exercise, but let's say instead of, let me look at that one more time. Let's say instead of, for books that we have multiple copies of, I'm getting the title and serial, and then I'm getting the title again and serial again. So let's say instead of formatting it that way, what if we wanted to format it so that the title only shows up once and then is paired with an array of just serial numbers? So Harry Potter, if it had 2 serial numbers, the title would only show up once, and then it would have a corresponding thing called serials, which would then be like a nested array. So every object inside of the outer JSON array would be a title plus an array of serials. So how would we do that in LINQ? And I'm just going to work it out in Visual Studio and kind of think about it a little bit as we go along. So what we want is something like this. So for every title, we want to select the title. And then instead of selecting the serial, we want to select something like serials equals an array or an enumeration or list of something or something. It has to be multiple serials paired up with each title object. So how can we do that? Well, we can use a nested select similar to how we can do nested selects in SQL, but we can kind of just nest objects in LINQ queries in C#. So I'm going to start by let's just start by selecting only the titles. So I'll take out the join, because that join is already giving me a title paired up with a single ISBN. I want a title paired up with an array of ISBNs. So I'll start by just selecting titles, and then I will also select serials equals, and then we can just do another LINQ query from I in db.serials inventory. And then we only want the ones that actually correspond to this T, to this title. So I'll just do where I.ISBN equals T.ISBN. And then we need a select. We will just select I.serial. Now we can actually use C# == here because this is not a join on condition. This is just a where. So we had to use equals up here. We can actually just use == if it's just on a where clause, not on a join. Okay, so let's try this now. We're going to get an array containing, each object in that array is going to contain a title and its own array of serials. Let's see what the return JSON looks like as reported by the view. There's the JSON. Let's take a closer look at it. Okay, so we get an outer array. For each item in that array, we get a title and something called serials, which itself is an array. This particular one only has one in it, but here's the Lorax. Has two serials inside of its own array. So we've condensed the information a little bit because we get, instead of the Lorax showing up twice for each serial number, the title only shows up once, and then we get all the serial numbers. But I said that we've condensed it a bit, but we can clearly see that this is more information than this, and that's because we got back the titles that don't have any serials. And we did it without a left join, but what we end up with is just an empty array instead of null or something like that. But if that's not what we wanted, we would have to change it a little bit. So here's just kind of slides on what we just did. I'll leave these up in the slides for archival purposes and studying and things like that. Let's look at another way of doing this, though. Remember, the scaffolding tool creates little shortcuts and conveniences for us. So let me just look at the scaffolded model here. Let me look at titles. We have the things that every book has, an ISBN, a title, and author. And then we also get this thing called inventory, which is a collection of inventory objects. And an inventory object is something out of that table. And that's the reason it generated that is because of this foreign key. There's a foreign key going from inventory to titles, and the direction of this foreign key means that every title could potentially have multiple inventory objects or multiple serial numbers associated with it. So we get a collection in the titles class, and we get a single title in the inventory class. But this is the one that is interesting for this problem. Remember, what we're trying to do is select a single title and an array or a collection of ISBNs for each title. So we can use this collection that the scaffolder automatically generated instead of doing our own query with this select like this. So all we need to do, instead of this whole nested query here, is serials equals T dot inventory. So see, Visual Studio is auto-completing here. Inventory is a collection of inventory objects. So instead of doing my own query to generate an IEnumerable, this is automatically just giving it to me straight out of every T object. The only problem with this is giving us the full inventory object, which has a serial number and an ISBN. And in our example, we only want ISBNs inside of that nested array. So what we can do is we do still need a select, so we can do from I in t.inventory select i.serial. Now it's a little simpler than what we had before. We got rid of the where clause because the scaffolder has automatically produced the inventories that are joined with this title, so we don't actually need to do our own filter or anything like that. So this will give us the same result that we had before. I won't actually run it, but this is what it would look like. But what if, going back to that question, what if we wanted to get rid of these empty ones? So this is like Spinning Silver and Dune. What if we didn't want these to show up because they have no serial numbers? Well, we can, let's just think about a way to do that kind of using C# and LINQ logic. By the time I've selected any title here, that's already too late. I don't want to even select the title if there are no serial numbers for it. So I can put a condition on this very top level loop, this from t in db.titles. I only want the titles that actually have some inventory objects. So I can do where t.inventory, and remember that's a collection. So I need something like, is not, whoa, that's an odd autocomplete, is not empty. This is just pseudocode. Easy way to do that, we just do where t.inventory.any. Any is a method that returns true if there are any things in a collection. So that will give us just the books that actually have associated serial numbers, and the serial numbers will be inside of a nested array. And there's the JSON. We can already see it's much shorter because it doesn't include things like Spinning Silver and Dune. Okay, so just kind of shortcuts and conveniences that will be useful when working on your Homework 6 and your LMS. A warning though, this inventory navigation, this collection that the scaffolder automatically creates, as I said last time in class, which was quite a while ago, so I'll remind you, this produces an SQL join at some point. You're not just getting data for free. So this is just an example of abstraction hiding what's really going on. You can't just use join all you want and assume that it's going to easily just get information out of the database. If this produces an expensive join, then it's going to be a little slow. Okay, wrapping up a final couple little LINQ conveniences. Let's go back and look at how do we update a row in LINQ. And this was from lecture 14, so go and review that if needed. But quickly, essentially what we do is we write a normal LINQ query that will select the object or objects that we want to change. We modify them, and then we do db.savechanges. So a common pattern, though, is we only want to update one object. So we write some query that we expect to return one result, such as this, where p.cardnum equals 1. Since cardnum is the primary key, that's only going to return one result. And then we could do something like, if we want to change the name of that patron, we could do query.toArray at index 0 dot name equals Joe, and then save the changes. We just need some way of accessing the first element of that enumeration. But this is pretty ugly. We have to convert it to an array and then index it first. There are better ways to do this. And another problem here is what if the query returns 0 rows? Like the patron with card number 1 doesn't exist, then this right here is going to be an index out of bounds exception. So a better way to combine getting the first element and also even checking if there is a first element into just better logic is we can use single or default on an IEnumerable. So query is the result of the whole query, which is IEnumerable. Single or default is going to return either the first, the one and only item in the enumeration, or it will return null if there were no items in the result. Okay, then we can do something like if x is not equal to null, update the patron's name, and then save changes.